Hello, all you beautiful people out there, and welcome to Saturday Livestream, where we make fun of the Bible. But before we do that, drumroll please, we need to get through the comment of the week. And today's comment of the week goes to Van Will Ames under the video Jehovah's Witnesses, God's Name, Lower Background. Quote, Watchtower says it doesn't matter, end quote. But they ascribe almost magical powers to pronouncing that name Jehovah, much like a talisman. They say only those calling on the name of Jehovah can be saved. If that is not God's real name, then you cannot be saved. So it does matter if you take a literal view of that scripture. 40 years a Watchtower slave. Thank you very much, Van Will Ames, for your comment. And now for Today in History. This one's actually a little interesting. Ireland allows the sale of contraceptives. It's interesting because Ireland is a Catholic country. In a highly controversial vote on February 20th, 1985, the Irish government defies the powerful Catholic Church and approves the sale of contraceptives. Up until 1979, Irish law prohibited the importation and sale of contraceptives. In a 1973 case, McGee versus the Attorney General, the Irish Supreme Court found that a constitutional right to marital privacy covered the use of contraceptives. Pressured by strong conservative forces in Irish society, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, the government was slow to change the law to reflect the court's decision, and a number of proposed bills failed before reaching the books. In 1979, the Irish Health Minister, Charles forgive me if I mispronounced the name, introduced a bill limiting the legal provision of contraceptives to bona fide family planning purposes. Signed into law in November 1980, the Health Family Planning Act ensured that contraceptives could be sold by a registered pharmacist to customers with a valid medical prescription. Still, many people saw the law as too strict. Over the next several years, a movement began to make contraceptives more easily available, causing bitter divisions inside and outside of the Dáil, Ireland's main house of parliament. As the government debated the changes, Catholic Church leaders railed against them, warning that increased access to contraceptives would encourage the moral decay of Ireland, leading to more illegitimate children and increased rates of abortion and venereal disease. Gonna stop here for a minute. That actually is not true. That is not true at all. But churches, the Catholic Church included, deals in fear, right? So this is how they get people to do what they want. Back to the article. On the eve of the vote in early 1985, the Dublin Archbishop claimed the legislation would send Ireland down a, quote, slippery slope of moral degradation, end quote. Some politicians were even threatened with violence if they voted for the legislation. On February 20th, 1985, a coalition of the Fine Gael and Labour parties, led by Dr. Garrett Fitzgerald, defeated the opposition of the conservative Fianna Fáil party by an 83-80 vote. The new legislation made non-medical contraceptives, that is, condoms and spermicides, available without prescriptions to people over 18 at pharmacies. It also allowed for the distribution of these contraceptives at doctors' offices, hospitals, and family planning clinics. Though it was still illegal to advertise contraceptives, and use of the birth control pill remained restricted, the vote marked a major turning point in Irish history, the first ever defeat of the Catholic Church in a head-to-head battle with the government on social legislation. Exactly, Nevermore. And, exactly who are going to take care of these children? Society doesn't want to take care of these children. It's up to the parents. And sometimes the parents are poor. And then you've got them going even poorer because they have more children because they can't get access to birth control. And it's just a mess. So yeah, definitely. All right. And now for the event of the day, the event you all came for. Me making fun of the Bible. And I titled this The Law, but the law is very, very long. And particularly when we get into Leviticus, it is very boring and very long. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that one. But just for simplicity's sake, I have titled this The Law. So, Exodus chapter 19. On the first day of the third month after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. That is a long-ass time, to be honest with you. I mean, technically, if you take the Bible at its word, which you shouldn't, but if you take the Bible at its word, that the Israelites had 600,000 men, not including women and children, the first people would get to Canaan before the last people even left. Nevermore, I'm not sure. I don't know what. It is an Exodus. I do know that. The 10 Commandments are in Exodus, but I'm not sure what chapter. And you got to think what 10 Commandments, because there are 2 of them. And I'll get to that a little bit later. 2 sets of 10 Commandments, people. Verse 2, after they set out from Rephidim, they entered the desert of Sinai, and Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. So, yep, right there, God is racist. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. Okay, why is he telling only the elders this? Because God told him to tell all the Israelites this. It doesn't make any sense. Verse 8, the people all responded together, we will do everything the Lord has said. So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. Why does Moses have to bring their answer back to the Lord? I thought God was omnipresent. If God is omnipresent, he should know what the Israelites said. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Verse 9, the Lord said to Moses, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you. Then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. And the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. So this is just utter nonsense. Okay, so right now, God supposedly is speaking through Moses and saying, hey, I want to talk to everybody. So you're going to go down and you're going to tell them to be ready. Well, you're God, supposedly, so why don't you just talk to them? Why do they have to get ready for anything? Doesn't make any sense. Verse 12, put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot to it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. Good one, God. We always knew you were, a homicidal and genocidal maniac. Just confirmed. Verse 13. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them. No person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain. After Moses had gone down the mountain to the people, he consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. Then he said to the people, prepare yourselves for the third day. Abstain from sexual relations. On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in a fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. The Lord descended to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, go down and warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish. God, did you already forget that Moses already did that? Verse 22. Even the priests who approached the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them. God's mighty OCD, ain't he? Verse 23. Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up Mount Sinai, because you yourself warned us, put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy. The Lord replied, go down and bring Aaron up with you, but the priests and the people must not force their way through to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. Chapter 20, and this is the first set of 10 commandments. Yeah, I know, right? Nevermore. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Note, he doesn't say I'm the only God. He says, you shall not have any gods before me. So he even admits there are other gods. Verse 4. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Why? Children should not pay for their parents' crimes. That doesn't make any sense. Verse 7. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. So I got a question. Can they even poop? Because that's doing work. All right. And again, babies come whenever babies come. They don't say, oh, it's the Sabbath day, I'm not going to come today. Babies come when babies come. Verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth. No, he didn't. The sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Hey, Marianne. I just want to say this is disgusting because God lists wives and servants as property. That is just disgusting. Verse 18. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." I thought God didn't test people. Whatever. Yeah, really, Nevermore? Hey, Marianne. Verse 21. The people remained at a distance, while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Isn't God supposed to be light? Why is there a thick darkness where God is if God is supposed to be light? Does that make any sense? Then the Lord, verse 22, then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites this. You have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold. Make an altar of earth for me, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, your sheep and goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it with dressed stones, for you will defile it if you use a tool on it. And do not go up to my altar on steps, or your private parts may be exposed." That is some weird ass shit. I kid you not, that's in verse 26. And do not go up to my altar on steps, or your private parts may be exposed. I kid you not. Chapter 21. These are the laws you are to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years. But in the 7th year he shall go free, without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, "I love my master and my wife and children, and do not want to go free," then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. No, God, it's more like the man loves his wife and his children and F the master, but because he wants to stay with his wife and his children, he'll serve the master. It has nothing to do with loving your master. Verse 7. Oh, by the way, before we get back into this, I'm having Dr. Josh on tomorrow for Atheist Church to talk about slavery in the Bible, not only in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament. Because I don't think slavery in the New Testament really gets a whole lot of exposure, but slavery is in the New Testament. So, Dr. Josh, tomorrow on Atheist Church. Moving on, verse 7. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as male servants do. Why not? Oh, yeah, I know why not. Because women are property. How did I forget that? Verse 8. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners, because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, she is to go free without any payment of money. Verse 12. Anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, if it is done intentionally, but God lets it happen, they are to flee to a place I will designate. Oh, wait a minute. If God lets it happen. So, how are we supposed to know God let it happen or not? How? Is God just going to say, you know what? I let this guy get killed, because he displeased me, because I'm just that kind of a dickhead. And, so I let this guy kill this other guy. So, don't put him to death. Verse 14. But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. Anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold or is still in the kidnapper's possession. Unless they're the spoils of war. You can kidnap the women and children from war, but don't you dare kidnap anybody outside of war. True, nevermore. Anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. If people quarrel and one person hits another with a stone or with their fist, and the victim does not die, but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held liable if the other can get up and walk around outside with the staff. However, the guilty party must pay the injured person for any loss of time and to see that the victim is completely healed. And what if the victim isn't completely healed? These are some dumbass laws. Verse 20. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. Also, if the slave dies after a day or two, don't punish them. Don't punish them. Unless the slave dies right away, you can't punish them. Verse 22. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take a life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. I think we've got it, guy. Verse 26. An owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. I think they'd rather have their eye or their tooth, God. Verse 28. If a bull gores a man or woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten, but the owners of the bull will not be held responsible. Why? The bull is just doing what bulls do. How can you hold an animal accountable for what an animal does? That's what bulls do. You know what? If you don't anger the bull, gee, what a concept. Not angering the bull. If you don't anger the bull, you're not going to get gored. Verse 29. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring, and the owner has been warned but has not kept it pinned up, and it kills a man or a woman, the bull is to be stoned, and its owner also is to be put to death. Why? The owner being fined, I can see, but why? Now, I do think that if an animal has a history, like, some Dobermans have a history of killing people, I think if they have a history, then that needs to be on a case-by-case basis. But you shouldn't be punishing animals for doing what animals do. That's just not right. Verse 30. However, if payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life by the payment of whatever is demanded. So basically, a rich guy can get away with it. Same old story. Verse 31. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or a daughter. If the bull gores a male or a female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. If anyone uncovers a pit or dig one and fails to cover it, and an ox or donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. Wow, God. And what if we don't know who dug the pit? Verse 35. If anyone's bull injures someone else's bull and it dies, the two parties are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. Does that make any sense? Seriously, does that make any sense? Verse 36. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it pinned up, the owner must pay animal for animal and take the dead animal in exchange. I'm very sorry, people. I should have put a facepalm warning on this. Chapter 22. Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it must pay back 5 head of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. Wow, that's very generous of you, God. Verse 3. But if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed. What sense does that make? What sense does that make? If someone is in your house, you have the right to defend it, period. Anyone who steals must certainly make restitution, but if they have nothing, they must be sold to pay for their theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in their possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, they must pay back double. If anyone grazes their livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and they graze in someone else's field, the offender must make a restitution from the best of their own field or vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads into thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. And what if the fire just started as fires can start just naturally? Verse 7. If anyone gives a neighbor silver or goods for safekeeping, and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judges, and they must determine whether the owner of the house has laid hands on the other person's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or any other lost property about which someone says, "This is mine," Both parties are to bring their cases before the judges. The one who the judges declare guilty must pay back double to the other. And now you know why we don't take these laws seriously anymore. Verse 10. If anyone gives a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to their neighbor for safekeeping, and it dies or is injured or is taken away while no one is looking, the issue between them will be settled by the taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other person's property. The owner is to accept this, and no restitution is required. Like, duh, because, animals die. Verse 12. But if the animal was stolen from the neighbor, restitution must be made to the owner. Why? Why should the neighbor have to compensate the owner? That makes him being victimized twice. Once because his house was robbed, and once because he's got to pay this dickhead, money for whatever it was that got stolen from his house. Makes no sense. Verse 13. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, the neighbor shall bring in the remains as evidence and shall not be required to pay for the torn animal. Well, duh, that's very nice of you, God. Verse 14. If anyone borrows an animal from their neighbor and it is injured or dies while the owner is not present, they must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal, the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss. Makes no sense. Verse 16. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. This is absolutely horrible. Why does a girl or a woman, either one, have to pay for something the man did? That isn't right. Verse 18. Do not allow a sorceress to live. Anyone who has sexual relations with an animal is to be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow, or the fatherless. If you do, and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. Why should they have to cry out to you, God? Shouldn't you be seeing all this? Verse 24. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. Doesn't sound like you're too compassionate to me, God. Verse 28. Do not blaspheme God or curse the ruler of your people. Do not hold back offerings from your granaries or your vats. You must give me the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but give them to me on the 8th day. You are to be my holy people, so do not eat the meat of an animal torn by wild beasts. Throw it to the dogs. Like I said, makes no sense. If you can find any sense in this, please tell me. Okay, last chapter, chapter 23. Do not spread false reports. Do not help a guilty person by being a malicious witness. Do not follow the crowd in doing wrong. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd, and do not show favoritism to a poor person in a lawsuit. If you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to return it. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you fallen under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure you help them with it. Do not deny justice to your poor people in their lawsuits. Have nothing to do with a false charge, and do not put an innocent or honest person to death, for I will not acquit the guilty. Well, God, your brand of justice isn't really justice now, is it? It's more of a sadistic justice, if you can even call it justice. Verse 8. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see and twists the words of the innocent. Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt. I kid you not. He repeated the same thing. Verse 10. For 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest the crops, but during the 7th year let the land lie unplowed and unused. Then the poor among your people, may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what is left. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. This never happened, people. And it's actually a very poor economic decision to make. Verse 12. 6 days do your work, but on the 7th day do not work, so that your ox or your donkey may rest, and so that the slave born in your household and the foreigner living among you may be refreshed. Be careful to do everything I have said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods. Do not let them be heard on your lips. 3 times a year you are to celebrate a festival to me. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread. For 7 days eat bread made without yeast, as I commanded you. Do this at the appointed time in the month of Aviv, for in that month you came out of Egypt. No, they didn't, but again, I'm not going into that. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. So obviously he doesn't care about poor people. Verse 16. Celebrate the festival of harvest with the first fruits of the crops you sow in the field. Celebrate the festival of ingathering at the end of the year, when you gather your crops from the field. 3 times a year all the men are to appear before the sovereign Lord. Do not offer the blood of the sacrifice to me, along with anything containing yeast. God really does not like yeast, does he? The fat of my festival offerings must not be kept until morning. Bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. What has that got to do with anything? Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. For the love of... Ugh. Verse 20. See, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you along the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. Pay attention to him and listen to what he says. Do not rebel against him. He will not forgive your rebellion, since my name is in him. If you listen carefully to what he says and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and will oppose those who oppose you. My angel will go ahead of you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and I will wipe them out. Sure, God. And when they go over into the promised land in the book of Joshua, which again never happened, the Exodus never happened, people. The conquest never happened. No, you didn't drive them out, did you? No, you didn't. Do not bow down before their gods, or worship them, or follow their practices. You must demolish them and break their sacred stones to pieces. Worship the Lord your God, and his blessing will be on your food and water. I will take away sickness from among you, and none will miscarry or be barren in your land. I will give you a full lifespan. I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all your enemies turn their backs and run. No, he didn't. Verse 28. I will send the hornet ahead of you to drive the Hivites, Canaanites, and Hittites out of your way. At the time that Israelites were a thing, I don't think the Hittites had been a thing for a long time. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to look it up. but I think the Hittites were long gone by the time the Israelites came on the scene. Verse 29. But I will not drive them out in a single year, because the land would become desolate, and the wild animals too numerous for you. Little by little I will drive them out before you, until you have increased enough to take possession of the land. I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. No, he didn't. I will give you, I will give into your hands the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you. Again, no, he didn't. And lest you say that, I need a citation or whatever, it is going to be, I will give it even though it's in the Bible. So don't worry about it. The Bible contradicts the Bible. So again, it's coming. Just wait for it. Verse 32. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. And that's the end of chapter 23, and the end of the really stupid Bible reading for today. And when I say really stupid, I mean really stupid. I mean, I'm listening to Junk Shop Library. If you're not, if you don't tune into him, you should, because he's really funny. And he's reading Ezekiel, and if you thought this was really bad, Ezekiel is just crazy. And I'll get to Ezekiel. I will. But I'm going, I'm going book by book, book by book, which is in the Protestant Bible. When I am done with the Old Testament in the Protestant Bible, I'm going to do the complete Apocrypha before I do the New Testament. But at any rate, it's like really, and this is another thing. If this friggin' book is the truth, why are there so many, not only interpretations of it, but so many, like the Ethiopians have like 80 or 83 books, and the Catholics have 70 books, and I mean, why these extra books? Why does anybody have any extra books in the Bible if the Bible is indeed the truth and the Word of God?
Hold on a minute.
Why?
We're right there.
Anyway, I'll let you guys go. I'm like really, really frustrated right now. So, I'm like really like whatever, So I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Coming.